Hi, this is Lauren, and again for the post for this class, my role is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Institutional Diversity. So the question I'm going to tackle for as it pertains to the academic freedom readings was what was my perception of academic freedom prior to the readings, and then how did my perception change. So when it comes to academic freedom, I think I had kind of a basic understanding of what that meant and how that related to free speech on a college campus. For the most part, my understanding and perception of academic freedom was it really pertained more towards our faculty member. So kind of after doing all the readings, my awareness definitely grew. I had no idea that academic freedom really did apply to our students and to just the institution as a whole. I guess I was always under the perception that that was more just free speech, for the students. I didn't know that it necessarily was deemed that term academic freedom. But my general perception, I understood that it was kind of the faculty members' right, if you will, or their freedom to kind of pursue their research, their lectures, their kind of professional topics and inquiry in whichever approach they felt necessary. Some of the things that I think changed after doing all the readings for this particular lesson was that academic freedom only applied to public universities. I guess I always knew that there were differences in the publics and the privates, but to know that a private university's contract really kind of maybe lays the law down a little bit differently for academic freedom and for the faculty and the staff members that are hired there, and the private universities can really kind of put their own restrictions on that. I think if I was a faculty member going into a private university, that might be something that I would probably be a little bit more aware of if I was looking to teach at a private university and have a better understanding of what that meant for me as a faculty member moving into the private world. So I think that is one thing that changed my perception, or that was one thing that changed for me, is maybe being more aware if I was moving between publics and privates, and then kind of how does that limit me? It seems like at the public university we're kind of allowed to do, for the most part, anything. And that also kind of brings me to my next topic when you think about tenure. I think my perceptions of tenure have always been mixed. I think faculty members should have the right to kind of approach tenure and be rewarded with tenure. But I think it's interesting that academic freedom only gets stronger with tenure. I think you see that on the college campuses, not necessarily with the role that I'm playing, but I wonder how that applies to diversity issues, how that applies to institutional diversity, and when professors are tenured or faculty members are tenured, but then they're kind of crossing into that gray area where the institution still has a right to promote diversity, promote inclusion, and promote that kind of safe environment, but faculty members are given this academic freedom, and then they're now tenured on top of that and allowed to kind of stretch the boundaries where they want. Where do you kind of draw the line, and where does that gray area? How does the university deal with that conflict? So I think that's a big question that I left after reading this. That maybe that gray area exists everywhere, and that's definitely a big conflict that I would think was new for me after reading this, is especially playing this role for the class. Another thing that I think I took away from this, or maybe that changed my perception, was that academic freedom doesn't only apply to a university. It also applies to primary and secondary schools. I just don't think I would have ever thought. I never thought about that. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that I've never worked in those particular settings, but that's never something that has kind of crossed my mind. Also, maybe just because I think of the primary and secondary schools as kind of an area that is maybe a little bit more focused. They have traditional core values. They're maybe a little bit more restrictive and inclusive and respectful, and it's not this world like higher education where you're encouraged to explore and kind of test the boundaries, if you will. It's much more focused and traditionalized, and so I think to know that academic freedom does apply to those faculty members or teachers, if you will, in those areas, I think was a surprise for me. And it kind of raised the question. I wonder how does that differ between public and private schools, and then how many of our teachers are aware that that actually does apply to them, and is that gray area also exist at those secondary and primary schools as well. So as far as the big things that changed for me was definitely the difference in the types of universities, and kind of that gray area. What happens, and how do universities go about dealing with that when you want to really promote diversity and protect your students, but then do you threaten the academic freedom that you've now given all of your faculty, staff, and students, but then you want to encourage your students and bring them into a welcoming environment and a diverse environment and protect them, but you want to encourage everyone to pursue that academic freedom. I think that gray area is really interesting, and I think that's probably the biggest thing for me that was enlightening, and that maybe changed my view of how academic freedom is approached, and what research is out there, and what is being done, and can there really be anything done. So that was what I thought about academic freedom. So I look forward to discussing this a little bit more and kind of hearing your feedback, and curious to see how everyone else kind of perceived academic freedom, and where you all were surprised, I guess, maybe like I was. So thanks for listening.